Welcome to the first episode of what I'm calling my Pokemon Grand Prix. Basically, Pokemon is one of my favorite topics to work with, but I haven't been using it as much lately, so for 3 of my Monday videos in a row, I'm going to make different kinds of Pokemon videos, turning Pokemon into different kinds of things. With one possible exception being if a certain video, like today's, brings in a lot of new subscribers or gets a ton of really great suggestions in the comments for what to do with a sequel, I might do a sequel to a video instead of doing 3 different topics. So subscribe or leave me some suggestions in the comments if you want more of what's happening today, which is Pokemon as aliens, something I did a mini episode about a long time ago, but it's time to do a full video around it for my current alien series. Let's go! Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
Bustar Terminax mission log quest 6 under new directives. Ship and I are headed off to the planet Pokemon Major for... who'd have thunk, another set of Xenomorphs that have started popping up from the local wildlife there. And this one could be a bit of a workout. See, the creatures of Pokemon Major have got some pretty crazy abilities already. It used to be a planet that had its own sentient civilization of folks that would capture the creatures of their planet and force them to fight each other for sport. Till the creatures started fighting the people instead. From what I heard, they wiped out something like 70% of the planet's civilian population, and the rest were forced off-world. Hunters and some flargin' brave tourists do still go down there, but it's no picnic. Especially with some Xeno versions of the creatures that live there now flying around. I've been there a couple times before, back when I used to kill the creatures I hunted, instead of capturing them to bring them back to the Ishkonian Nature Reserve like I do now, and honestly, it's exactly my kind of place. I'm stoked to go catch some Xenos there.
I am happy to hear you are so excited for a mission, Bustar, and while I do respect your skills, I would like to point out that 5 different hunting parties have already gone missing and are presumed dead from pursuing the bounty on this quest. I advise you to proceed with caution.
Appreciate the concern, Ship, but I already know why every hunting party has failed. Listen to some of the logs that were reported back before those parties kicked the bucket, and while they did take out a few Xenos down there, none of them could handle the flying ones. And fair enough, flying Xenos are tough, but they ain't gonna catch me off guard. I heard word that they'd spotted a Xeno version of this creature from Pokemon Major that was thought by some to be just a legend. Critter the locals once called Latias. It can refract light in a way that makes it basically invisible, and it can telepathically read the emotions of anyone within 200 meters of it. So I'm betting this Xeno version waits till its prey is nice and calm and unsuspecting before it attacks. Plus, it can fly as fast as any inter-atmospheric jet, so not much chance of getting away once it spots ya. But I don't even think that's what caught the other hunters off guard. See, if they ain't done their research, the other hunters might not have known that this critter has a brother called Latios. It's possible that Latios got infected on its own, then the Xeno version of it killed Latios as well, but my bet is both of them got infected, and now there are 2 of these things flying around, picking off hunters and other creatures of the planet, with one of them being the distraction, while the other one goes in for the kill.
Well, I am glad you are very well researched on the creatures of this planet, but how do you intend to capture creatures that can turn invisible and fly at such remarkable speeds?
Well, for one, they ain't invisible on all light spectrums. But more important, I said they can fly faster than any inter-atmospheric jets. That don't mean they can fly faster than you, Ship. Now for this episode, I only planned on doing 3 drawings for it because I wanted to make sure to spend a little bit more time on each one, make sure they looked really good. But then when I realized that I was heavily considering Latios or Latias, I realized that I could probably do what I'd done in my recent Spider-Man 2 Villains Venomized episode, where I recolored some of those characters from Venomized versions into anti-Venomized versions, and in this I was just like, oh yeah, Latios and Latias basically look the exact same, just with different color palettes and a slightly different symbol on their head. So I could have 2 different versions, or 2 different characters from this one drawing, basically. So I start with Latios, and then I flip the drawing so that it's facing a different direction, just to have a little bit more variety in there, and I recolor it as Latios, then also just do a little bit of tweaking to the symbol on its forehead. I also didn't realize once I picked the Pokemon for this episode that every single one I picked, in a way, is based off of some kind of flying craft. Because Latios and Latias are based off of jets, Genesect can kind of turn into a spaceship, and Dragapult is kind of based on a stealth bomber. Which was just a coincidence, I didn't intend for that to happen, but it also kind of worked out nicely from a lore standpoint, because it gave me some good ideas to work with. Lastly, for this drawing, I didn't realize going into it that Latias is actually supposed to have feathers, but even if I had known that, I don't know that I would have given my Xenomorph version feathers, though I do think it could be kind of cool to experiment with a feathery Xenomorph in the future. Mission Log Entry 2. That was a wild ride. We landed down on a mountain near where the other hunters had been taken out, and I had Ship cloaked to look like an extension of the top of the mountain. Ship is 76 feet long and 44 feet wide, so we had to find a nice big landing spot, but we got one eventually. Then I stood on top of Ship, wearing some super magnet boots and gloves along with my hydrogram suit, which is meant for helping me breathe and offset pressure underwater, but can also help against getting my face torn off by high-intensity winds. I put in infrared contact lenses so I could see the Xenos even if they were invisible, then started doing some breathing exercises the Ishkonians taught me to keep me seeming cool and unsuspecting, while also being totally ready and present for any slight sounds or movements sneaking up on me. But what ended up coming at me first wasn't either of the critters I was expecting. Something came flying at us, but it was some kind of bug xenomorph hybrid thing with a cannon popping out of its back. Didn't recognize it as a Xeno version of any sort of creature from Poketo. I mean, it kinda resembled this long extinct creature called Kabutops, but I doubt this thing had any relation. I stayed ready to give Ship the call to start flying when this thing shot some kind of laser at me from its cannon. I dodged to the side, and luckily Ship's hull was hard enough not to take any damage, but I wasn't gonna let that thing take another shot after that. I pulled out one of the Paralydiscs that the Ishkonians gave me that can knock Xenos out cold. Got ready to toss it, when out of nowhere the Latias Xeno appeared and started attacking the big purple bug thing. They started scrapping in midair, but I was smart enough to think about where the Latios one might have been. I saw the clouds breaking in the distance behind us and knew something was coming in fast, but again, the thing didn't come after me, it went straight for the purple Xeno bug thing. Turned into quite the brawl, but this bug was tough, and it was fast with its cannon. Was doing some serious damage to both the Xeno siblings, so I figured I could help them out. Told Ship to get ready to catch, and when the bug thing got close to me but wasn't looking, I tossed the disc onto its back, and it instantly went out cold. Ship opened the top hull doors, and the bug fell right into a containment pod. Of course, then the other two finally took notice of me. Didn't seem like they were happy about me taking that thing alive. I told Ship to jet, and I just barely clamped down with my magnets fast enough as we started flying well past the speed of sound in a few seconds flat. Even with my hydrogram suit on, I felt like my whole body was going to be torn to pieces by the G-force, but those Xenos were following us and coming in fast. Luckily, that's exactly what I was hoping for. Ship started slowing down ever so slightly so they could get closer and closer. Then, on my word, Ship slowed to half speed, opened the back doors, and the two Xenos flew right inside, where I had knockout gas rigged up to blast them. They were out cold too, and I dragged them both into their own containment pods, ready for transport back to the reserve.
Sorry to interrupt, Bustar, but I have finished scanning the terrain over the surrounding 20 clicks where we encountered the insect creature and have found an anomaly, which, based on its signature, could very well be some form of underground laboratory.
Figures. I got a pretty good idea who's behind those Xenos showing up here and that bug Xeno thing, but we best go check in on this anomaly and find out for sure. Now, Genesect is a Pokemon that seemed like a perfect one to xenomorphize, although really I didn't completely make it into a xenomorph. I mean, I kinda did. I used xenomorph elements, but story-wise it'll get slightly more explained in the next chapter. But also in most cases, xenomorphs don't actually have eyes, and in this case I kinda gave it like big insect eyes, sort of like Genesect already has, except not like mechanical mech armor kind of ones, more like an actual insect would have. And Genesect is a Pokemon that I've gotten requested a bunch of times for my Pokemon as SCPs series, and it's still possible I could end up adding it to that series at some point. But I felt like it would be more fun doing it in this series and letting me add a little bit more of my own personal flair to it and throw in some of the xenomorph design elements that I thought would really fit well on its actual design. I also thought it fit well for this episode because it's kind of like already a genetic experiment. In actual Pokemon lore, Team Plasma took some ancient Pokemon and altered it and added a cannon onto its back. Some people have suspected that it's Kabutops because they look kinda similar, and there's some other things in the lore that kind of line up, but I don't think that's actually canonically true. Anyway, I hope you all like this design. Let's take a look. Mission Log Entry 3. My suspicions were pretty much confirmed. Ship and I got to the area where the scan had detected an anomaly, and we found a door in the ground to what might have once been a sewer system, but had been converted into an underground lab. There was a ton of tech and computers and scattered papers and a bunch of specimen jars, with lots of them having different xenomorph body parts and eggs in them. But the place did look like it had been pretty ransacked. From some of the papers, I gathered that this place had been run recently by a scientist named Dudley, who worked for the Plasma Insurgency. They're descendants of the people who fled this planet, and they see it as their birthright to take it back someday. This Dudley guy sounds like he was one of the more extreme members and had built this creature using xenomorph genes that he called Project Genesect. His plan had been to make a whole army of them to take out all the dangerous life on this planet. But even the Plasma Insurgency thought he was going a bit too far, so they pulled his funding and he couldn't make more than the 5 Genesects he'd already made. So he came down to the planet with what resources he had and started working on a new plan. Using what he learned about xenomorph biology, he started breeding his own xenomorph eggs, making them with a defect built in that made them lethally allergic to a certain concoction of chemicals that couldn't be found in nature, didn't harm his people, and he could easily produce. Then he used his Genesects to carry those eggs out into the wild to infect different creatures of Poketo Major. His plan was for one or even a few of them to spawn a xenomorph queen so that it would make more of those eggs to slowly infect and kill off the majority of the creatures on the planet. Then he could just gas all the Xenos with that concoction of chemicals, kill them all off, and boom, his people would have the planet back.
That sounds like a highly illogical plan with many variables that could easily cause the entire thing to fall apart quite easily and quickly.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened, it seems. First off, the Xenos he was making, for some reason, really hated his Genesects and killed most of them off, maybe only leaving the one that we just captured. But problems got even worse for him when one of his eggs did manage to make a Xeno queen, from a creature of the planet called Dragapult. So this queen could fly real fast, turn invisible, and not just make Xeno eggs, but birth and shoot a new breed of facehugger that could fly for its targets faster than even Latios and Latias. Explains how those two ended up getting caught. And that very thing almost got me too, cause it turned out it was hiding out there down in Dudley's lab. Probably came looking for his Genesect at some point and found him and killed him, and that's why the lab was all torn up. Before I'd gotten down there, it had turned invisible. Must have done that cause it heard me coming, but I still had my infrared lenses in, so I saw it before it could shoot one of its facehuggers at me to infect me. It still did get a couple shots off, but I batted them both away with my Pyrogalf staff, then used that thing's flamethrower to distract it while I pulled out my Paralodiscs and used those to knock it out. Though it did take 3 of them to actually get this thing out cold. But it's handled now, got it in containment on the ship, and ready for transport.
An incredible job, Bustar. I never should have doubted you. Though, how do you think the Ishkonians will handle having a xenomorph queen in their reserve? There are non-xenomorph creatures there that I'm sure they do not want to see infected.
That's a good point, but I'm sure they'll figure something out. They're pretty smart. Before we head back though, I'm thinking we should cloak the ship again and spend the night here. Do another check of the terrain in the morning. Those facehuggers got away from me and could have gone to make more Xenos, plus there's no telling how many that queen could have made before it got locked up. Could be no more of them, or there could be dozens more. We'll have to wait and see. Though I don't want to wait too long, because I've been hearing some rumors that I want to look into. People are saying that the Intergalactic Safety Commission has been disbanded. And if that's true, and I can get my hands on a multiversal warp drive, no one's gonna be looking to gut me if I go and check out some other dimensions. Sounds like a fun time to me. Now, Dragapult is a Pokemon that got super popular when it was created for Sword and Shield, I believe, and I've seen it requested a bunch of times, but it's not a Pokemon I actually knew a ton about until doing this episode, and it just came to mind super quickly as a Pokemon that would be perfect because I knew it could shoot the previous evolution versions of itself out of its head, the cannons that are attached to its head, and I just thought that was a great idea for a Xenomorph queen to be able to shoot sort of a blend of like the face huggers and the chest bursters, like the first stage of a Xenomorph after it's been incubated inside someone. Both in terms of art concept-wise and story-wise, I thought that was going to be super fun to work with, and I really like how this drawing turned out. Also, just a reminder for anyone that hasn't heard, the PopCross Studios Patreon is now free for everybody, so if you want the high-resolution art from this episode and the inks from this episode to color yourself, they'll be up on Patreon the day after this video is released. Plus, there's tons of other free bonus stuff on there now that, again, free for everybody. I'll have it linked in the description. But anyway, I hope you all like the finished result of this drawing. Let's take a look.
And there we have our first video in my Pokemon Grand Prix. If you've got suggestions for other Pokemon you want to see as Xenomorphs, leave them in the comments, or even for different Pokemon related videos you'd like to see, because I have an idea for ones that I want to make, but I'm open to suggestions. Also, if you enjoyed this, you might want to check out my Pokemon fused with Monster Hunter creatures episodes. Those have some of the best art I've ever made on this channel. Or if you want more aliens and Xenomorphs and more out of Bustar Terminax, I recommend starting with the first episode of Minecraft mobs as aliens. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course we're ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with is something I heard this week from a man named John Assaraf, who essentially said it can be very useful to you to try and think about what you want your life to feel like. It can get very easy to get bogged down in what job you want and what things you want to acquire or achieve, but odds are you want those things because subconsciously you believe they'll make you feel a certain way. So try and think about how you want your life to feel and see if that gives you any new insights about the things that you actually want. I think it's a very good self-awareness practice. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday.